Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to our VAC Roundtable. Today, we are going to be joined by a friend of the family, a friend of our reality, somebody I've, been blessed to share workspace with, and somebody I greatly and deeply respect. Her name is Sabrina Fendrick. She has a very long and colorful background in cannabis, as well as policy. And I cannot thank you enough for joining us and our veterans today. And we will jump right into it as I change the view. Good job, Etienne. Yay. All right, Sabrina. Our first question is one that has many layers in the sense it's a simple question, but the answer probably comes from different parts of your life. So, our first question is when did you originally come to cannabis? And in that sense, it was when did you first hear about it? And when did you get first turned on to it? And then when did you realize it was going to be a significant part of your life's work? So, everybody, Sabrina Fendrick.
Hi, well, thank you for having me. First of all, it's an honor to be here, and that is that is quite the question. I am happy to answer that. Let's see, when did I first come to cannabis? Well, and I was pondering that. I I think probably the first time I ever heard of cannabis was during a dare class. Um, yeah, I can't.
Where were you? Where was that class?
I was in third grade in Arlington, Virginia, and the police officer came in with his little briefcase with the little samples of drugs and gave his big scary talk. And then we had to write essays, I guess, about why drugs are bad. And my essay came in second place. And I was like, oh, this whole program's bullshit. So- I don't believe a word that they say. Um, no, but I did come in second place. And yeah, so that was the first time I think I had heard of it. Um, Probably after that, hanging out with friends' older siblings. People would smoke it in high school. It was around a lot. I played a lot of sports, so I wasn't, I hadn't tried it first time I tried it, I was a sophomore in high school. So it was a long time between having first heard of it and then trying it. And it just was never in my orbit. My parents definitely did not consume ever, and nor did any family members. So yeah, we were doing, I was part of a theater after school theater group and the drama play that we were putting on for the county and all of the public county schools. So we would train every day after school for a couple of weeks, and then every school day we got to get off of school to give these performances to the different classes that would come by. But we would get out earlier
Hey,
than we normally would at school.
stop talking.
And so the group of us uh would go over to a one of our castmates' house, and that was the first time that I tried weed. It was this beautiful sunny day, and it was just a bunch of the castmates and crew members, and we gathered in this screened-in sunroom. So we were protected from the bugs, but we could smoke. And somebody rolled a blunt, and somebody else, and I cannot remember how they did this, but they built a gravity bong or some sort of smoking contraption out of a one of those office-sized water jugs. And And so we had those two things going. And I remember I did the water jug and I was feeling great. And I was sitting on the couch just looking out, and the weather was perfect. And in Virginia, it's rare to have a perfect weather day. And so it was just everything was wonderful. Someone passed me the blunt. I took a hit from the blunt, and I just remember thinking, wow, this is really awesome. This is pretty sweet. And walked home. It was like a 2 mile walk, but I didn't care because it was so pretty and I was so happy. And yeah, so but that didn't, it was just a great experience. That was part of my theatrical journey. It didn't really continue into the rest of my year. Um, I didn't really find my passion for cannabis until I was in college, and I had a series of unfortunate events occur in my life that sort of led me to, at first, just appreciate the benefits of the plant and of smoking weed, and then to feel passionate about or become informed and passionate about ending prohibition. And the first one was I, after my freshman year of college, I was a social smoker. I never bought my own, but I would hang out with friends that all smoked weed, and I would partake regularly. My sophomore year, I developed a seizure disorder. And so I had moved off campus before this seizure disorder, and I lost um, my ability to drive for several months. And so it was just a really depressing, isolating experience. And a friend had left some weed after a party or something that I had thrown at the house, and I just decided to try it on my own because I'd never really done it by myself. And it just had the same sort of relief and um, benefits that I very much needed. And so that's when I decided to start buying my own weed. And that's when I think when I decided to start buying my own weed is when I officially like came to appreciate it for its strictly for its benefits for me and not as a social thing. I mean, I would do it socially, but um, it was like I had my own personal reasons for it. And then I got busted in college, or I'm still in college. I moved back on campus the following year and had just spent the summer in New York City where I was getting really good weed and, increasing my passion for the plant and frustration with its inaccessibility. And that just started to really piss me off. But I never thought about it more. It was just an annoyance. And so then I had moved back on campus my junior year, and my roommate, who came from this very conservative um, Central Virginia town, was discovering a lot of things for the very first time, including marijuana. And it was when Facebook was brand new, and it was only for college students, and it was not even for every college student. And so they just added this pictures application. Oh, now it's duh, but then it was a new thing. And so we started putting pictures up because we thought it was private. I mean, it was before social media, privacy, all that stuff. So, I mean, it was, a very dumb mistake, but we put pictures up, and my friend was a police aide, and showed his friend the pictures, who then reported us to the campus police, who then showed up at 5 in the morning and insisted on searching my room and they started going through my drawers, and I had just taken a class that summer called Crime and Defendants Rights. So I had like some knowledge. I was kind of into it, but I was still feeling out what I really wanted to do. And so when they were going through it, I was like, I don't think you can do that, but I wasn't super sure. And then I was really pissed off that I wasn't super sure. Like I should fucking know that. And and then they threatened me and said, well, we can do this and send you to judicial affairs, or we can call Newport News Police and they can come arrest you, blah, blah, blah. So I gave in and they found the weed and I went to judicial affairs. Then they, I guess, reported us to Newport News Police anyway, who a week later came to our door, like five or six of them, and then insisted on searching the house. Less than a week later, an entire like drug vice SWAT team in full military gear shows up at our house, knocking on the door, insisting on getting let in, and somehow they're talking about cocaine was being dealt out of the house, and there was just some bullshit. I mean, it was insane. And that's sort of when I was like, what in the actual fuck? How is this such a big deal? Oh, and because I got in trouble with the school and judicial affairs, so I had to write an essay and we got assigned books to read. And my roommate who well, got us in trouble um, was assigned the book Reefer Madness by Eric Schlosser, which is super random because as a punishment, I'm not sure if it was because the woman just was trying to subliminally get in there or she just had no idea. I don't know. Because it's not even just about marijuana. It's
That's
just
so
about,
bizarre. I've never heard of anybody during a bus recommending them reefer madness. Really? Wow.
right? Yeah. Yeah, Reefer Madness. And he had to write an essay on it. But my roommate, because I was getting increasingly frustrated, getting like fucked by these laws. Oh, and I had gotten busted for underage possession of alcohol, so I had to go through the probation and get drug testing. And so me not getting drug testing was like the final fucking straw. And so, like, this is some bullshit. I'm just trying to smoke some weed. I don't know why it's such a big fucking problem. And so I started getting really into it. So when my roommate got assigned that book, he was like, Sabrina, I think you might be interested in this. In the book, I was assigned for punishment to read. And I was like, really? Okay. And it blew my mind wide open and completely changed my life. And I changed my college senior thesis from propaganda surrounding the Second Iraq War, 9/11, and the Iraq War to reefer madness propaganda from 1937 to 2007, which was the year I graduated. And
Holy shit. That's a hell of a journey in cannabis, sister. But it's also, how many people have been busted for cannabis that was their final straw, right? And it was a catalyst for you, right? You saw the injustice and you're like, yeah, it's happened to me. It shouldn't happen to anybody else. And you put yourself into the game. So respect for that. Okay. Next up will be Council Member Mike Davis with our next question. Council Member.
That was an incredible story. Oh my God.
oh, thank you.
Yeah, especially, the reefer madness whole theme and oh my God. Um oh, yeah, so my question, I used to actually work a lot with diplomats too. And I heard a little bit about your, story and everything prior to coming on. And so you led kind of a little bit of a interesting, childhood growing up. So growing up as the daughter of US diplomats, you had a pretty global perspective early in life. So, with those experiences, how do you think that influence in your decision to challenge prohibition and eventually step into cannabis advocacy?
Well, as the years go on, I think it had a larger influence than I appreciated earlier in life. Um, really reflecting on it, it wasn't just growing up the daughter of diplomats, but it was where I was when I was an adolescent at that time. And I was in Paris when the Berlin Wall came down at the end of the Cold War and the lead up to it, um, which was where a lot of the signings took place and negotiations. And my parents were at the U.S. Embassy, so um, everything about that was was pride and coalition building, um, which was just instilled to me as that's just what you do when you want to achieve a goal. Um, and so then my next the next overseas one that I experienced was post-apartheid South Africa. And it was my parents had been there in the 70s and early 80s trying to negotiate for Mandela's release from prison and to replace the apartheid system. And then we went back in 1997. So apartheid ended in 94, I believe 3 years after apartheid ended. So it was in the middle of this insane transition. Um, and I grew up learning all about Nelson Mandela and the fight to end apartheid because my parents had worked on that right before I was born, and we were going back there. So it was all like the whole story, the narrative was very familiar to me. And and then when I had started playing soccer in the States in Arlington and really liked it, but when I moved to South Africa, women didn't play soccer. There were no women's soccer teams, there was one women's league in Cape Town, and I moved to Johannesburg, and so it's over 1,000 miles away. Um, so I ended up having to fight to get on, join a league. I tried out and I was able to make it, but it became I was 12. I didn't realize how big of a deal it was going to be, but it became a whole big deal. And the local paper wrote an article about me and um, the challenge of me trying to find a league of my own, no pun intended, to play with and couldn't. And so, but it was like my only constant. I really wanted to play. And so experiencing just the reaction to my wanting to play soccer and it being from my teammates and from audience members and from other teams that I played who would scowl and hiss and say things and um so I witnessed these sort of injustices and geopolitical changes if from multiple lenses, personally and peripherally. But the lesson always was that when you see a wrong or you see an injustice, you fight it and you challenge it and um, you make it better. So just like with the ending of the Cold War, the ending of apartheid, me playing soccer and trying to normalize women playing soccer in South Africa and in Johannesburg, I would just, was what I was going to do. So I guess translating that whole perspective and mentality to when I experienced and witnessed the injustice of American prohibition, it was just a sort of natural step to challenge it and fight it.
Oh, wow. That's one hell of a journey. I mean, and through so many social justice issues, right? And you also, I guess it also helped you see that what you were experiencing was a social justice issue. And because you had been in a world of, well, we don't just talk about it, our family changes it, it makes sense that that would be a path that would naturally fall to you or towards you. All right, we got some follow-up questions. Michael Crowitz first. You're up.
Well, it just strikes me, when we first sort of crossed paths, I had already sort of switched gears a lot and was already working in Vienna, Austria on international stuff. But earlier, I had started that work in the grassroots movement. I talked to a lot of people. I talked to almost everybody I could in the grassroots movement about the international treaties and our U.S. Constitution and how we have to pay attention to this. And I would get this incredible response from grassroots, like hate for the treaties, like hate for the international, the world, the international, like one world government came up a lot, I'm just wondering, like, did you ever experience anything like that? Or was that just like sort of compartmentalized in your life so the grassroots movement really never talked to you about their thoughts about the diplomatic world?
I guess compartmentalization would be a good word. Yeah, it never, it didn't, my background as a foreign service brat didn't really come up a ton in my cannabis work. I mean, it's just so domestically focused. Um, I and in those domestic focuses, everyone has their own opinions on that already. So, yeah, no, I don't. Yeah, I wouldn't say. I mean, no, the only one I have isn't from grassroots. It would be a story from my mom in Afghanistan. But again, that's from, the um, foreign service and foreign service work.
All right,
I don't know. I hope that answers your question.
Mike Davis, with your follow-up.
Yeah, not so much of a question, more of what I think more of an astute observation from what you were saying, which is more along the lines of, as us as veterans. I know I was active duty for like 15 years and traveled around the world too, and I think that from some of the stuff that you said is, as living in your adolescent years, being abroad kind of exposed you to a lot of things that say, most people in the United States kind of, they don't get to see. And, being from that perspective, and kind of things that are going on in this world, it sounds like, you are exposed to more empathetic things. And when you see those wrongs and you want to make those right, I think a lot of us are here in the Veterans Action Council because we've seen a lot of the wrongs and we want to make those right. And, that's important to us. And especially as veterans, a lot of us, do this out of selfless service. And, we are all volunteers because, we are trying to do things that are right, and and you're doing the same thing as well. And I think that it just is one of those things that from your story, from sharing that, putting that into perspective of just being out in the world and traveling and getting that experience, produces that empathy, because you don't get to see that from just sitting on the internet, or what I mean, clickbaiting. And it's important that people get out there and see what's really going on in the world, in order to affect real change and be empathetic towards people. Because that's kind of, I think we've kind of lost that in society and in the world. And that kind of is important. And that's what I really wanted to say. And yeah, so.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, people need to get out to other parts of the country than where they live and find that empathy.
Well,
Yeah.
the cure to racism is traveling. Isn't that what Samuel Clemens said? All right, Nate Landau has a follow-up. Nate, you're recognized.
Uh, amazing background story I saw when you started promoting your book on LinkedIn, and I'm so fortunate that we get to interview you. My follow-up question is, I'm just thinking of the context of the time. it was the mid 2000s. There was limited medical in California, Oregon, maybe a handful of states. We were definitely not where we're today. And sure, arrested gets you fed up and everything, but what gave you like the courage to believe that you could enhance a difference when the political system was still, both sides of the aisle was still very against cannabis. We were just getting out of the three strikes you're out era with Clinton. So just curious what gave you the courage that to go against such a big behemoth.
Great question. I, I don't know so much if it was courage or just blind ambition is the wrong word. Um, but it was just something that I felt so deeply in my core. And I wasn't sure that I was going to do that as a job professionally. Um, it was 11 months between the time I graduated college and got my job at NORML. And so in that time, I did some temp work for marijuana policy project stuffing envelopes and uh, applied to some of their jobs and then applied to NORML. But I wasn't sure um, before that if that's where I was going to end up. I was just trying to, I mean, this was the spring of 2008 for context. So, I just didn't know what was going to happen. And then when I saw that NORML was hiring and I applied there, um, and I got called back and I got offered the job, it was not even, I didn't even think about it. It like truly felt like a dream job. And I was like, I'm going to get paid to get down and dirty in the trenches and try to help change these laws and push this movement forward. And I'm like, how did I ever get so lucky? And my parents and a lot of friends were not as enthusiastic, and they said, that I would be blacklisted from other jobs and no one would want to hire me. And I was like, fuck that. I wouldn't want to work for anyone who wouldn't hire me because I wanted to legalize weed. So that's just gonna be a fact. And yeah, so I I guess you could call it turned into bravery, but I was just so enraged by my experience and then exponentially frustrated from my research and learning that the entire like basis of prohibition was bullshit, and that this was it. This was going to be the cause. This was my fight. People needed to stop getting arrested for it. People had a right to access it and use it. And I was going to do everything I could to make sure that people understood that. And yeah, so some of my friends distanced themselves from me because they went to work for government contractors or, um, certain members of Congress or whatever. And I, at the time, working in cannabis was controversial, especially NORML. Um, but yeah, I didn't. And I look back and I'm like, wow, I really, really didn't give a fuck. I was so young. And I mean, I'm glad I did it. It was definitely, if I'd known better, I guess you could have called it bravery.
Oh, that's well stated. I think we all find our voice and our space and our strength along the way, but you had a solid, backing from family, and then going into NORML, of course, the fear and the, of shunning even, right? So, you know, you have to stand out on your voice, and that I think helps entrench you in your voice because you realize what you've done, how you've done it, and why you've done it. And you don't see, I think for a lot of us here, we get it. We see when that light comes on, you're like, yeah, fuck this bullshit. Because yeah, I wondered myself back in the early days of Can, was it bravery or stupidity? I think it was a bit of both. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I had to have a foundation in some sort of activism to feel that I could at least speak my voice. And I
yeah,
think your parents empowered you well there, but you just grew into your own and followed into your own, shoes, which is,
yeah.
very, brave in its own self, you know.
They'd rather I go be a congressional staffer or something.
Of course,
My
go be
dad got
vanilla. Don't be chocolate.
Yeah.
Good thing
Yeah.
you've stuck with flavor. All right.
Hmm.
Next question will be Michael Crowitz, because
Thank you.
continuing our discussion on the National Organization for Reform of Marijuana Laws.
Yeah, so before I ask this question, I'll accept the premise of the question. Part of the premise of the question is a very male-dominated legalization movement. But I want to say something about that. My experience really hasn't been like that. And you may not know this history, so give me a few seconds and just let me tell you a few second history of Virginia Normal. And it's maybe a little dyslexic, even maybe a little off, but mostly right. I haven't talked about it in a long time, but the Virginia Normal actually had of course, Virginia Normal was where National Normal started. Many people don't know that. National Normal started in Virginia and then moved to DC. So Virginia Normal was National Normal for a little while. And then later, VCU came in, I think, as a normal chapter, like in the late 80s, and had a really powerful, kind of presence. And then they went away. And then there was like a really early 1990s Virginia Normal that was out of Virginia Tech. And then that went away. And when I came in, the person that was still left over from that world was Susan Anderson from Virginia Tech, math professor. And she was my mentor. I mean, she got me started, and it was all around her. And then I met Lennis Worth, who was like the center of my universe for a very long time, and actually, one of the most important mentors I would ever have. And then later, meeting up with Mary Lynn Mathry, and coming up in a whole different world, under medical cannabis stuff. And then Sandy Burbank giving me, some of the what you might call PhD lessons in cannabis activism. Etienne and I were just reflecting earlier about Sandy's lessons are still to this day some of the most important lessons we've ever gotten as cannabis activists. Literally, we did that. I'm not just saying it. And then Alice O'Leary is not just my mentor from over the years, but she's Veterans Action Council's mentor. We have a mentor, and it's Alice O'Leary, Alice O'Leary Randall. So, and others that we could consider mentors that are women. So I don't know how I could have ever been an activist without the women that were around me. I was always surrounded by women, and they were the leaders. And so anyway, let me ask you a question. With that having been said,
I let me
um,
just add that I was also one of those women in Virginia who brought back an iteration of the chapter of Virginia Normal back
indeed,
in.
indeed, and that's for the audience. That's why I was saying it the way I was saying
Yeah.
it. So anyway, so here's the question. At Normal, you founded the first grassroots initiative to mobilize women in a largely male-dominated legalization movement. What challenges did you face in trying to elevate the women's voice, and what strategies proved most effective in reshaping the whole debate?
Yeah, well, first I'd say Virginia is very unique in its activism makeup, demographic makeup. And it would do others well to replicate Virginia's ratio, gender ratio. Um, but okay, so yeah, the challenges that I faced, well, there were several. I think the first one was when the whole concept was introduced. There were people that would question what the purpose of it was. Um, and some would sort of complain that it was gonna separate the movement or uh, break the unity of the movement, such as it was. And to the first question, which I was really stunned by, just as a general response by, I assumed one or two people, but I beat that. I had to create like an auto response form to this actual question, which is how many times I got this question. And to which I would say my first answer, which strictly political answer, is that everyone from the NRA to the ACLU has a women's focused program in their organization. And they have that for a reason because that's the way to reach out to that particular demographic is from women to more women. And the reason, one of the arguments that could back up the need to put resources into this sort of women's outreach program was because the support among women for legalization was 10 percentage points behind that of men at the time. And that's what was holding back the national average from hitting over 50%, that crucial 50%. And it was the largest demographic gap. So the question became, all right, how do we build more support among this demographic? And in order to build support among this demographic, we need people like them talking to them and people like them creating the messages that will be compelling to them and palatable to them. So, and also create that community that women are known for, women as nurturers and community builders and everything like that. And the greatest way to increase support for this issue is to get women talking to other women about it, and to also getting news coverage about women talking to other women about it. Um, so that was the my basic, most politically like unemotional answer I can give you is that it was, women's support was 10% down, and we needed to do something to change that. So we had to create the business as usual wasn't cutting it. Had to create some sort of new program that could sort of identify and reach out to that demographic. Um, and let's see, what was the other part of the question? Uh, oh, that it was splitting the movement. I mean, I, 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 I don't even know how to, I didn't know how to answer it now. And, creating groups such as a veterans cannabis group, a women's group, cannabis group, everybody has their community and their shared interests within that community. And so if that's going to help increase support and outreach, then that's what absolutely should be done. And, I think that, yeah, just really opening up to women to make them feel more comfortable. I think certain people couldn't understand that from their perspective because of their, lived experience was different than that of the type of people we were trying to reach. And, but we powered through. And it was crazy. I got hate mail. Hate mail. I mean, why? I didn't understand why it was such I didn't expect it to be a hot topic issue. I mean, I was familiar with, you know, sexism and stuff in third world countries and developing countries, but I continued to wrongly assume that America was more progressive in certain areas than what I ended up experiencing. But I will say Virginia NORML has produced some incredible women.
Absolutely. 110%. All right. Wow. Great explanations there, Sabrina. I know that's a lot, and you've been through a lot there, and it's rather surprising. And Michael's right; it was very female oriented. But for those who are watching, the National Organization for Reform of Marijuana Laws was very male dominated at the time. Those people that were in charge and running it were all guys in suits, white guys in suits. Let me clarify. Okay, so and nothing against white guys in suits. However, that should give you a percentage of the idea of the demographic that Sabrina was dealing with. All right, next up will be Councilmember Nate Landau. Councilmember, you're recognized.
Again, thank you so much for being here. My question is, you were featured in A Normal Life and Mary Jane, The Women of Weed, and later in Can Legal Weed Win? What role has storytelling through film, books, and media played in legitimizing and expanding the cannabis movement? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that I took my background in studying political communication and have found that the most successful social movements have been able to disseminate their issue through emotional narratives and an emotional lens. And especially when it comes to one with such a stigmatized background, you have to sort of go into overdrive to challenge that. And when you humanize, um, by showing people's actual stories, the mother who lost her child because CPS rules don't respect state medical marijuana laws and will, open a child custody case for child neglect because this legal patient's using cannabis. And um, it's telling stories like that can be incredibly powerful for people that don't aren't familiar with these issues that could be, especially since they're so nuanced and can be very complicated. The most people's understandings broken down into, the reefer madness that they grew up with, mixed with today's version, or however they perceive today's version of cannabis in their area. And so, the more the more that you can give an audience member or a potential supporter the opportunity to feel sympathy for a person and anger at an injustice. Um, I think that's what has been the most helpful in all of these in the storytelling components of it, and also doing it through multimedia aspects in this day and age. It's absolutely crucial. When we started the Women's Alliance, it was the very, very, very beginning of social media. But I knew it was going to be a big deal. I knew we had to leverage it. We had to get it on video, get it on not tape, I guess. Um, we just needed to document it in all mediums that exist in today's world and share it to as broad an audience as possible through the way they want to disseminate it. If that,
Yeah, there you go. Right out the gate. All right, I've got the next question. So we're interviewing you because you wrote a book, and your book's called Tokin Female. And it talks about the double burden of fighting cannabis stigma while also battling sexism within the movement itself. Looking back, how do you see the role of women evolving in cannabis activism since those early years? And has the cannabis space been a better actor in this regard than society at large?
yeah, that's a
Light
excellent
ones.
question. Yeah, very light. Oh, whew, well, I would say the role of women involving in cannabis activism has been unbelievable in the last couple of years. With we had an intermediate head of MPP who was a woman. We had the intermediate head of ASA, Steph Scherer, the founder, um, is around. Brooke Gilbert, interim director of NCIA. There's, I think, in in that particular area, that is one of the most exciting changes that I've seen in my time in cannabis. To see that those women be put in those positions of power and really thrive. Um, shows that we have come. We've made, but like the whole issue for women, I mean, there's been progress and there's been setbacks. And I think just the evolution of Me Too has created an awareness that didn't exist before that has, um, if not created change, at least created a conversation about it. And, workplace respect and inter-movement respect. And so yeah, I mean, I think that women are also now, when I started, it was the first women's cannabis group ever. Now there's women cannabis groups. There's just these women have started like finding camaraderie with each other and building communities with, I couldn't even name all of them. But there's this, it's really heartwarming to see all of the women's industry groups and activism groups that have grown out of the NORML Women's Alliance or were inspired by the NORML Women's Alliance. And yeah,
Yeah, they've come a long way from being used as trays to be served food on, is what you're saying. If you're sorry, for those who
yeah,
don't recall, there was an actual cannabis event, and they actually used women's as serving platters,
yes,
and that caused a large kerfuffle as well as a ripple, and made people understand that, women are not objects. Women are contributing to this right here, right now. But people had to be shamed for doing dumb shit. And shit still does happen. And, as the society at large, especially in the cannabis community, have to call them out for that bullshit. We will not stand by that type of stupid sexism anymore. So, Michael Krauss has a follow up.
Yeah, just I wanted your opinion on some, it's I guess thinking about this stuff and having, sort of opened the floodgate in my own brain about history. I just wonder what you think of this. The cannabis movement itself basically started in the mid 1960s, and at that time, I mean, there wasn't. Um, I mean, there it was certainly, undoubtedly a male-dominated legalization movement, right? Even from the start. I can't think of any icons of the mid 1960 leaders that were female off the top of my head, and that's bad enough right there. You got the cannabis historian online, can't do that. That's a problem. So anyway, the thing was though, if you were an activist, you were an activist. There were female activists, there were male activists. There was no like exploitation of women by the activist community that I can think of in the mid 1960s, early 1970s. At what you might call the heyday of the cannabis movement. Um, I almost want to ask you a question. I probably don't, you can't answer. And that's, when did that happen? I got historical questions coming in, but what do you think of that? I mean, is there some observation that you would make or any thought you would have about that? That it seems, to my perspective as a historian, that this is either a newer phenomenon or a more highly developed phenomenon of really kind of not just not having women at the top, that's bad enough, but exploiting women, having women walk around the parking lot with cannabis signs and bathing suits at a fucking marijuana thing or something like that. That's a new level. I never saw anything like that. You saw women naked in the 60s photos standing next to men who were naked. Everybody was naked, so I just don't get it. Anyway, I just wanted to share that. If you had some kind of, make sense of it or thought that you could share, I'd appreciate it.
yeah. Well, I think for your question about the women in scantily clad outfits, that I would imagine was probably born with high times. And I have no idea, but that's what I would assume. It sounds like it's along with their marketing. And in terms of the question about, what the 1960s and 70s, male, female activists, and I don't know if you refer to exploitation as just like the scantily clad or as just sort of the harassment within the movement or
Well,
things like that.
like for veterans, when we started working as a veteran stakeholder, community inside the cannabis space after we got a VA policy back in like 2010, I went to all the conferences and I put down like what I consider to be a bold line in the sand. Veterans want to help. Veterans want to be, whatever you want us to be in these projects. Just don't bring us in at the last minute as a photo op, as some sort of, uh,
Mm.
put a face on it for you thing. We
Mhm.
need to be functionally part of the project, or you're exploiting us essentially. So I mean, that's not exactly portable to women, but that's where my head goes.
Oh yeah, well, we want to be functionally part of the project. I identify with that 1,000%. Yeah. And I can imagine that the women that were part of the movement back then were the note takers and coffee brewers and weren't exactly, I mean, I don't know when women were allowed to have their own credit card, but it's not like female empowerment was a thing back then. I mean, it was becoming one, but I mean, we don't have to get into why the women's movement split from the civil rights movement. It, so, I mean, yeah, they all kind of come back to the same general thing. If we all understand those um, influences and those forces, I think it's the same. And it's probably part of the catalyst for the Women's Alliance and the success of the Women's Alliance.
Well, that's also what we appreciated about your name and the entendre of your name is because we don't like being token veterans.
Yeah,
And that's a big problem that we have, and that's what Michael's referencing, right? We get
100.
the photo op and the pat on the head and the okay, we don't want to hear anything. So I think we can relate in that perspective. That's a similar pathway, but
Absolutely.
I think it's women walked a harder one because of the outright sexism that wasn't just advertised, it was proliferated, it was expected, especially through the 80s and even into the early 90s. I mean, there was a point where we even stopped carrying high times at Berkeley Patients Group because there was just so much outright blatant female sexual exploitation that Debbie's like, yeah, fuck this, fuck you guys, fuck everything about it. And that type of boycotting did spark a backlash that did affect change, but that's something we even had to do with our own people, sadly. So just more for the historical perspective than for, in Sabrina's response. I appreciate your response greatly. Nate has a follow-up as well.
So I want to mention the women's group that I am familiar of. There is Blunted Brunch. This lady, I forget her name. She does like around MJ BizCon and all this stuff. She does women only brunch. There's the Women Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, and they just had a women expo, which is pretty much only women event in Reno.
Right.
I joined the cannabis industry in 2015, and at the time, it was encouraging to me that I might be playing with the numbers here a little bit, but in the average industry, not the cannabis industry, but all industries, women business owners or executives were 18%, but in cannabis, it was 25%. Very encouraging that it was bigger. And they were saying that women had a bit of an advantage on that because they had less of the cannabis stereotype. But unfortunately, that number has gone down, and cannabis is almost at a not below the other industries threshold. Do you see? Is there any way we can fix that, or why that has led? Is it this general consolidation in the cannabis industry, less mom and pops? Do you have any insight to that why that number has dropped in the past 10 years?
Um, it is sad to see that number drop, but I think it's a reality with an evolving industry when it was prior to 2017 and earlier was the laws were a lot less clear. It required a lot of creative maneuvering in every aspect to open and run a business, which I think is something that I mean, women might have a certain area of strength in. And when you're in that sort of environment, that kind of, economic business, not even a business environment, but this sort of new evolving um, market, then you can be more flexible in your tools. As it became legal in different states, that brought in, and this is just my opinion, I'm not an economist, but that brought in, I wouldn't say traditional, but more traditional, less risk averse investors who were waiting for some sort of, formality on a state level to happen. And ones who were wanted to get in early, waiting, thinking, well, adult use was going national legalization was going to happen. All of those people, with their money and venture capital firms and private equity, and they're all run by men. The money is all distributed by men, and it's just general knowledge that, people like to lend money to people that look like them, that can bro out with them, that can, um, I mean, it's harder for a woman with three successful cannabis businesses to raise, I think it was like $1 million than it was for the founders of MedMen to raise 5 million after their failed MedMen venture. Um, I think is just the perfect example of that, and how you can be overqualified, successful businesswoman, and it's exponentially harder for you to scale and find capital because people are, if it's between her and a MedMen bro, they're probably going to go with the MedMen bro, sadly. But it is what it is. That's just my opinion.
Thank you for that. All right, next up will be Mike Davis with the next question.
Uh, yeah, so during your tenure at Berkeley Patients Group, you became a prominent advocate for equitable policies in the Bay Area. What lessons can today's advocates take away from your work to ensure cannabis policy reforms don't leave the marginalized communities behind?
Coalition building would be always my first point of advice. You can't do shit unless you build a coalition. As much as we all like to think we could, you can't. Um, I think that obviously requires compromise, and not everyone's going to agree on everything all the time. But, taking a perspective of incrementalism, which most of you clearly have given your amount of time in the space, I think that is very important. And I think, at least while everyone's waiting for adult use, national legalization, or some variation of national reform, I guess. Um, Rethinking equity is something that I think many places could benefit from. I think that, especially in terms of not leaving behind marginalized communities, different forms of the equity structure as it exists right now is incredibly limiting to, when you have, for example, Berkeley has, at least when I was there, it may have changed, but I doubt it, one one equity license that they are so generously giving out, and with that, they have washed their hands of their part of the drug war and their part in the damage that it has caused, and I think that that is disingenuous on everybody's side, because even for that one person that is going to get that license, that shouldn't be their only pathway to generational wealth, especially in a a legally conflicting, federally illegal industry might not be the best pathway for someone who has lived with all of the restraints of a criminal record their whole life or for much of their life. And maybe they want to open a flower shop. I mean, like a rose shop or a toy shop, and not necessarily this cannabis business. So, I think providing tools or resources or the ability to for them to do more than just open a pot shop, I think would be a great start. And then I also think if it is going to be a pot shop, while one or two owners isn't enough, I think they should be employee-owned businesses. Equity businesses should be employee-owned businesses for people that had criminal records. And that's probably controversial, but there's a film production company. I can't think of the name, but they basically everybody that works there has equity in the business. They're not part of a union because they don't need to be. And oh, it's Matt Damon and Ben Affleck's production company. Um, so it just seems like a really super successful model that can really speed up the impact that legalization is supposed to have on these marginalized communities and helping them.
Great response. Thank you for that. Next up will be Michael Krowitz.
Thanks, Kim. Given our conversation right before we turn on the video, I'm going to kind of turn this question upside down and rewrite it. But we took great interest in the fact that you were featured internationally in BBC, Times of London, Rolling Stone. You've had interaction with some of these folks, in that sort of context of them asking you questions and talking to you, we assume. Looking at it through a lens of gender and equity, what can you tell us about them based on their questions to you?
I think that the entire concept that women could be glamorous pot smokers was novel to them. That was the sense that I got, that it was almost like a mind blown thing. Oh my God, you're not these stereotypical drug-addled, greasy haired hippies in a corner. Um, these are, I think the imagery, which was the entire purpose of the photo shoot, which caught the attention of the British media, and it was the imagery and the visual of it, and that it was the first time there was any depiction of a woman or a group of women looking sophisticated and advocating for marijuana. And so it was almost the same with some of the reporters that I talked to in the States. I think the British ones thought it was, it was more of like a cheeky, funny thing. But on everybody's conversation, they were all just like, "Holy shit, which was what happened to me when I first discovered the article Pot Couture and read about that description of women, in high heels and classy outfits that smoke weed, and it had just never been depicted in the media before, ever. So it blew all our minds.
Mind's blown. It's a thing. Next up will be Nate Landau. Councilmember Landau, you're recognized for the next question.
The next question will be, you were integral in securing the designation of medical cannabis dispensaries as essential businesses during the COVID-19 pandemic. Could you walk us through how the advocacy unfolded behind the scenes and what lessons it offered for ensuring patient access in future crises. Thank you.
Ooh, slightly triggering, but I'll get there.
Well, I'll just kind of give a little bit of history here because it actually started in a VAC meeting. Okay. So VAC had a little bit to do here, but Sabrina got the handoff, and it started from one of our members, Brian Buckley, who had a piece of paper from San Diego's Department of Health because Sacramento needed some information, or at least they wanted something that showed something was happening. And I was able to get that. And then I got it into Sabrina's hands, and then Sabrina became the magician. So, Sabrina, the magician, how'd you do
Well, the beginning's a little bit more dramatic than that.
it? Yeah, well, I'm leaving that to
So, oh, oops, hang on. Hang on. There you
They're
go.
gonna have to wait for the movie to come out to get that
Yeah,
version.
seriously. No, so the beginning of the story sounds like a fucking movie. Let me tell you that. I had my birthday's March 13th, and my grandmother had passed a few months earlier, and she had spent her life in New York, and so I wanted to go out there, spend my 35th birthday in New York, take my husband who'd never been there for the first time, and it was going to be this whole, we were going to go to I got tickets to Broadway. It was going to be this great fucking birthday trip. And so we got there on the 11th, and things started to get weird. Broadway was canceled, but I was like, fuck this, we're staying. And then they closed the borders, and everybody was rushing back to the States, and I was in New York. And one of the things that my dad worked on when he was with the State Department was government responses to pandemics. And one of the things, the playbook that they said existed that nobody followed, like my dad helped write the playbook. And one of the things that he kept telling me, and he was like, "You have to leave the island," was because if they cut all access to Manhattan, there's only 72 hours worth of food on the island. And so he's like, "You're gonna run out of food, blah blah blah." So I was devastated and we flew back to California and went to Monterey or something to finish because I had taken a whole week off from work. And we're driving around Monterey. I'm gonna hang on. Uh, we're driving to a beach or somewhere in Monterey. I get a call from ATN who's like, Sabrina, I'm so sorry, but you're gonna have to cut your vacation short and come home. And he's like, shit's getting weird here. Um, so I was like, well, fuck me. My birthday is this is okay. Well, let's go. And canceled that trip, went back to Berkeley. And then I um got a call from the head of our cannabis inspector. So not the head of the Department of Health, but the guy who worked for the Department of Health as the cannabis guy. And he was cool. And he called me and was like, they're talking about shutting you guys down. Um, you know, he didn't have any more information. Then I think it was like a day or two after I got back to work, the city issued a shelter in place. And it was, one of and a couple other Bay Area cities were the first in the country. Then there became a fight with the city council and the Department of Health over whether cannabis was designated an essential business. That there was the issue because they said medical. I mean, it was absurd, insane, multi-week back and forth. But so we had this fight with the city, and nobody knew. We were getting emails them saying to close, then other ones were like, well, medical's okay. And then the state shut down. And the state specifically excluded cannabis as an essential business. So then the fight went from Berkeley, which eventually we got resolved and were able to get that essential designation after it felt like weeks, but I think the Berkeley issue was probably within a week that we
I
got it from
remember
them.
being, it was pretty quick.
It was quick. Yeah. I was
Yeah.
surprised at how quick it was. But I was like, hell no, you're not. This is exactly when everyone needs their weed. You like you can't take that away. Um, and then yeah, and so then the state also decided to do their shelter in place, fight over essential businesses again. Um, then the BCC came out with its own emergency. Well, I can't even remember how we got to curbside pickup, but we did, and and delivery, and we were able to keep delivery and curbside, and then we had to create these um this process for employees when they would come in and get the temperature check and had to fill out all these forms and do all these compliance things and yeah, and then what you were checking for changed because they were always changing. The CDC was always changing and updating information, and then there was the fight over vaccines and whether cannabis employees were could get vaccines first. Um, and we triumphed every time, but it was a fucking battle. I mean, I say the tax lowering battle was kind of hard too, but I think it was just because it was also emotionally heightened and everyone was scared and didn't know what was going on, and I just in my soul was like, this we cannot people need weed right now. Like this is bigger than any like they we you just can't shut down access to that and force everyone to stay home. It's cruel. Yeah. And if you're gonna let alcohol be delivered, then you should let fucking weed be delivered.
Right. And it was yeah, now that you remind me of all that, I've forgotten a lot of the trauma and the PTSD that we got from, because also I had to buy the cars, right? Because I could no longer lease because now cannabis was legal. I previously had a fleet that I was able to lease, but the laws had changed so much around cannabis. Now the car rental and ownership places had, laws even against, medical cannabis. So even just getting the cars for our delivery and all that, it was such a it was very intense. It's almost daily battles at times to, just coaching each other, just checking in and, making it. But I mean, the most important was when we got that form from Brian Buckley from San Diego, and you were able to get that into, the DCC as well as into state legislators' offices so that they could see that, oh, wait, there's a municipality. And then once California, and for those who are watching, once California had deemed medical cannabis essential, it rippled through the entire United States. So, it's kind of hard to believe that a few dedicated people can literally make ripples of change in times of crisis, but being a part of it and sharing a little bit in your shade, Sabrina, there, because you were the main person really dogging it with the city, with the state, and making that happen. So forever indebted, and I guess I forever owe you a vacation still. So,
Everyone heard it here.
all right. Well, I guess that brings me to our final question. So, having had a strong hand in shaping policy, okay, which you have, where do you think our cannabis movement is headed now? Are we on the right track, or are we drifting off course?
Well, full disclosure, I've taken a bit of a break from cannabis the last few years. So take my opinion with that context in mind. I think a lot of well, yeah, I mean, I'm marginally aware of things that are going on, and I would say that well, let me put it this way. I saw a memory on my Facebook page the other day that was from 12 or 13 years ago, and it was a Senate hearing about state and federal marijuana law discrepancies. And I was just like, oh, okay, wow, here we are 12, 13 years later, could have this very same hearing again, and it would probably be, the same, most aspects of it. Um, so interesting with our country and having states with their own systems. I think that it's a very, um, what's the word? I don't, it feels like there's multiple tracks running and trying to be built at the same time, as opposed to, are we on the right track? There's different tracks. Some might be heading towards each other, but I think that everything is still, if the cannabis movement were, the whole caterpillar to butterfly thing, I would say that it's in the mushy part of that, of the larva. When a caterpillar, in order to become a butterfly and be successful, it has to go through this like mushy larva change. And that's sort of where I see the cannabis, because it can't really do anything. All these little creative aspects are being put in place to get around the main problem that is its federal illegality. I mean, everything else that is all these ridiculous, CBD or hemp versus weed 0.3%, everything that is ridiculous about existing state cannabis laws is tied to federal prohibition. So, for the most part. And so I think until that changes, but it's just a matter of what that's going to look like and how that's going to unfold. I know that's a whole big debate in itself. Um, I still maintain that the first priority should be to remove criminal penalties and expunge records. Everything else after that can happen. I think we'll be on the right path if that's the path that we go by and prioritizing that. But if that doesn't happen first, I don't know when it would happen. And I think that would be unfortunate if if that component, if the decriminalization component got derailed in favor of business components.
Well, thank you for your perspective. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your decades of activism. And can't blame you for taking the hiatus. And we do hope that in time you will find your way back to it. But, one of the things we've taught our veterans and our activists is that we need to also remember to rest. They teach us to fight, and the fight is so hard, and the fight is so hard and so intense. Um, it causes a great deal of burnout because of the amount of challenges that are faced, as well as um, kudos to you for fighting through that many, many times. And I'm very happy that you've been able to find your happiness as well as find a new husband and a wonderful place in life. I can see the happiness on you and in you, and it's just absolutely been a pleasure and an honor to have you share time and your very, very historical, wonderful perspectives. I cannot thank you enough for your book, right? I know that I've been a proponent as well. There you go. So please tell everybody this is your time to promote. So this is Sabrina's book, Token Female. So I will get back
Yes,
to
Token Female.
So yes, tell them where you can find this book and how to find you.
You can find it on Amazon. I apologize for the anti-Amazons, but it's the only way to become an independent publisher, which is what I am. And you can write in TOKIN apostrophe female FEMALE, and it'll pop right up. You can also find me and the book on Facebook, Token Female Memoir, and also on Instagram, and find me at Sabrina Fendrick. Oh, you're on mute.
Well, there we go. I'm back. There we go. Sorry, I forget sometimes I mute myself. All right. Well, I want to thank our council members, Mike Davis, Michael Crowitz, Nate Landau, and myself, Etienne Fontan. And of course, our very wonderful special guest. Reminds me how much I miss you. You're the best. Nothing but the best to you and your family and everybody. All right, everybody. This has been our VAC Roundtable 93. Sabrina Fendrick, author, Token Female. Find it in Amazon. Go get your copy. Is it on Kindle too?
Yes.
It's on Kindle and in
On Kindle
paperback. So,
and paperback, and it will be coming out in hardback this fall.
well, expect to get a signed copy hopefully in time.
Absolutely.
But I've got my digital copy and my physical copy already because it's a great book. It's a great read, and what you've done for the history and the movement hasn't been forgotten. And thank you for bringing your perspective through your book, which is very important for everybody in the movement to read. So again, thank you everybody for joining us for VAC Roundtable number 93. Sabrina Fendrick, author of Token Female. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.